August 2015. The thick, humid air enveloped a small garden in Cavite, Philippines, about 20 miles from Manila. The forensic flashlight of investigator Marcos Del Rosario pierced through decades-compacted soil, shining directly onto something no one was ever supposed to find. "Control, I need backup at the Cavite scene, and request the forensic team expand the excavation area." His voice echoed across the empty yard, bouncing off the faded concrete walls. What began as a routine assistance request from the FBI had now become something entirely different, something that was about to answer questions that had haunted Oklahoma for 33 years. A skeleton buried deep beneath carefully repacked earth, and right beside it, a metal watch engraved with the words, D. Ward, USN Ret, 1981. The very watch Daniel Ward was wearing the night he vanished from Weatherford in July 1983. For more than 3 decades, Ward's disappearance had been nothing more than a puzzling blur in the Oklahoma police files, a disciplined man who simply vanished without a goodbye. 3 days of silence, a missing person report, and then nothing but unanswered questions. An unverified telegram sent from the Philippines, a death certificate bearing the wrong signature of the police chief, a $243,000 military life insurance payout issued just months after he disappeared. 2 empty chairs at every family holiday dinner, a bedroom kept exactly as he left it. Before we continue this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like the video. Your support helps bring forgotten cases back into the light, and the algorithm will make sure you never miss the next part. The discovery of the remains in Cavite wasn't just the end of a missing person case. It was the first domino in a chain of events that would expose secrets hidden for 3 decades, secrets tied to financial disputes, forged documents, and the disappearance of a respected former officer. Because when authorities finally identified the suspect and made the arrest in 2016, it wasn't a stranger or a random criminal. It was someone the community had trusted, greeted every day, and who had lived among them for 30 years, carrying an unimaginable secret. The Ward case isn't just a mystery solved, it's proof of the persistence of investigators who refuse to let a file gather dust, and of the power of forensic science when it becomes the voice for victims who have been silent far too long. It's also the story of a community torn apart. When Ward vanished in 1983, rumors spread through Weatherford like wildfire on dry prairie. Did he run away? Was he killed for revenge, or murdered by someone close to him? Those suspicions crept into dinner table conversations, divided neighbors, and left cracks smoldering beneath the surface of a small American town. Cracks that would explode when the truth finally came out after 33 years. What makes this case especially haunting is that the answer was never far away. The prime suspect had been interviewed back in 1983 and slipped through the cracks for lack of evidence. For decades, that person attended prayer vigils for Ward, looked his family in the eye, and maintained an innocent appearance while hiding the biggest secret of their life. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always love knowing how far these stories travel and how we're all connected. Tonight, we're going back to the summer of 1983, following the trail of a disappearance that was buried for decades and uncovering the stunning twist that finally closed one of Oklahoma's oldest cold cases. This is a story of loss, deception, persistence, and justice delayed but never denied. Summer 1983. Oklahoma was experiencing a period of minor upheaval but remained socially stable. Small communities in central and western Oklahoma still moved at the slow, familiar pace tied to farming, education, and the many veterans who had returned from the Vietnam War. Weatherford was a quiet town of fewer than 10,000 people where everyone knew each other by name, and news traveled faster than the morning paper. In that setting, 43-year-old Daniel Ward, a retired U.S. Navy officer, was regarded as a respected, upstanding member of the community. He had served 20 years in the military before retiring and settling with his wife, Evelyn Marquez, in a modest home on the southern edge of town. After leaving the service, Ward worked for a civil engineering contractor, a stable job with good pay, and stayed closely connected to his old Navy buddies. Neighbors described him as calm, punctual, and a creature of habit. In early July of that year, Ward told a few friends he was heading to the Philippines to take care of some personal matters involving immigration paperwork and lingering military-related administrative issues. The last confirmed sighting of him was when he left his house one evening, telling his wife he was heading out early to catch a morning flight the next day. No one saw him actually leave for the trip or show up at Oklahoma City Airport as planned. After that day, Daniel Ward never called, never wrote, and never contacted anyone in his family. At first, his relatives assumed he might have missed a flight or lost contact while traveling internationally. By the third day, with no word, worry began to spread. Calls to his old office, Navy buddies, and close friends turned up nothing. All they knew was that his personal car was no longer in the garage, and the house looked perfectly normal. When every reasonable explanation had been ruled out, unease settled over the family. Finally, on the afternoon of the fourth day, after exhausting every avenue, Daniel Ward's family officially reported him missing to the Weatherford Police Department. The call was logged at 6:20 p.m., routed to the on-duty desk, and within an hour, Police Chief Douglas Flynn personally took the report. Flynn, a veteran of civil cases, began by taking the family's initial statement. The report identified the missing person as a 43-year-old white male, retired U.S. Navy officer residing in southern Weatherford, last seen at his home on the evening of July 8, 1983. The family provided details of the trip Ward had supposedly planned. He intended to travel to the Philippines to resolve lingering military administrative issues and arrange an adoption, expecting to be gone about 3 weeks. According to his wife, Evelyn Marquez, Ward had packed a bag and driven away that evening, saying he would get himself to Oklahoma City Airport. No one witnessed him leave, and no neighbors confirmed seeing his car on the road that night. When asked to produce flight tickets, booking confirmations, or itinerary, Evelyn said her husband kept all those documents himself, and she didn't know the details. Police immediately began the first administrative verification step, sending requests through the Civil Aeronautics Board to cross-check passenger manifests for Pan Am, Continental, and Northwest Airlines for the entire period of July 7, 12, 1983. All three airlines returned results showing no passenger named Daniel Ward or any close variation. An expanded check through federal immigration records, coordinated with Customs and Immigration, also found no exit record matching the victim's passport number. Flynn added a note to the report that as of July 14th, there is no evidence the subject left United States territory. Next, he focused on witness statements to pin down the exact last sighting. The family said he left in the evening but couldn't recall the precise time, only that the house lights went out sometime after 10 p.m. Next-door neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Perry, said they saw car headlights flash in front of the Ward house around close to midnight, but couldn't confirm it was his vehicle or someone else's. Another neighbor farther down the street reported hearing an engine start around the same time, but didn't see any movement. The details were inconsistent, making it impossible to fix the departure time within a 3-hour window. Meanwhile, co-workers at Ward's engineering firm said he had never mentioned any upcoming international trip in the preceding weeks. One administrative employee recalled Ward requesting short-term leave but never submitting a formal application. When asked about the state of the victim's marriage, one co-worker described him as going through some family stress and having mentioned wanting a change of scenery. That directly contradicted the wife's statement that the marriage was normal, with no serious conflicts. The discrepancy led Flynn to add a note, "Personal relationship status requires further verification." A close Navy friend, reached by phone, confirmed speaking with Ward about a week before the disappearance. In that conversation, Ward never mentioned the Philippines and only said he needed to take care of some personal matters. When Flynn requested the family's phone records and mail be checked for any international calls, none were found around the time Ward supposedly left. Bank records provided by the family showed no transactions for airline tickets or travel expenses. After compiling everything, Chief Flynn produced an 8-page preliminary report highlighting 3 key points: no evidence of international travel, no consistent timeline for departure from the home, and conflicting statements about the couple's relationship. The temporary report was forwarded to the State Coordination Office with a recommendation for continued monitoring for 30 days. Flynn's final note in the conclusion read, "Current data strongly suggests the subject has not left the state of Oklahoma. Domestic scenarios that could lead to prolonged loss of contact must be considered." With that assessment, the case remained an active local investigation, awaiting further confirmation from aviation and federal agencies before moving to expanded verification. After completing the preliminary report and finding no evidence that Daniel Ward had left Oklahoma, Chief Douglas Flynn decided the next step was to search the victim's residence. A search warrant was approved by the Custer County Court on July 16, 1983, for the purpose of locating documents or evidence that might clarify travel plans, financial status, or personal contacts prior to the disappearance. The search took place the following morning, conducted in the presence of 2 officers and a family representative. The Ward home was a single-story house in a quiet neighborhood with 3 main rooms and an attached garage. The search log noted that the house was properly locked with no signs of forced entry. All furniture in the living room, bedroom, and Ward's office was neat and undisturbed, no broken items or signs of a struggle. Officers began with the office, considered Ward's personal workspace. There they seized various administrative documents, retirement records, correspondence with the Navy Department, bank statements, and a personal notebook containing short notes, but nothing specific about a trip to the Philippines. On the desk was an Olympia typewriter with fresh ink and paper, sealed as evidence for later examination. In a desk drawer, police found a valid U.S. passport issued by the State Department with no recent stamps or signs of use. It was still current and showed no entry or exit marks. Flynn noted in the report that the passport remaining at home reduces the likelihood the victim left the country legally. Officers also collected financial documents, utility bills, car insurance, credit card statements, showing Ward's spending stopped after July 7, right before he supposedly left. The couple's bedroom showed no signs of a fight or disturbance. Ward's clothes and personal items were neatly put away in the closet. Only a few casual outfits he typically wore on business trips were missing. Suitcases were empty. It was unclear if any had been used. In the garage, Ward's personal car was gone, but the floor and driveway were clean, with no clear tire marks due to prolonged dry weather. Police checked a small storage shed in the back, noting empty cardboard boxes, packing paper, and a few fresh scratches on the door handle, but nothing sufficient to indicate violence. The entire exterior, including the backyard and fence, was visually inspected. No unusual objects or signs of digging were found. After more than 3 hours, the team cataloged 27 items of evidence: the passport, financial records, personal correspondence, office equipment, and documents related to life insurance and the couple's joint bank accounts. Everything was sealed, numbered, and transferred to headquarters for storage and later handwriting, ink, and behavioral analysis. In the post-search summary report, Flynn concluded, no traces of violence or unauthorized entry found, living environment maintained normally. Some personal items missing, possibly taken on a trip or removed. Based on these findings, police determined the scene showed no clear signs of criminal activity, but the documents and luggage raised questions about the authenticity of the trip described by the wife. The search report ended with an order to forward all seized materials to the Technical Division for classification, forensic examination, and regulated storage, while keeping the house sealed, pending further direction from the chief's office. Immediately after completing the search of the residence and cataloging the evidence, Police Chief Douglas Flynn shifted focus to the outdoor scene search, with the goal of determining whether Daniel Ward had actually left the Weatherford area. Based on information provided by the family and the victim's known travel habits, the investigation team identified the most likely route Ward would have taken: the highway segment connecting downtown to Highway 54 eastbound, the main route toward Oklahoma City and Will Rogers Airport. On July 18, 1983, the Weatherford Police Department, in coordination with the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, organized an expanded search team covering a 20-mile radius from the residence. A detailed topographic map was created, marking potential stopping points such as gas stations, diners, parking lots, and low-visibility areas along the route. Investigators manually swept each section of road while contacting nearby service stations to gather information from employees who worked the night shifts during the relevant period. No one clearly recalled seeing a person or vehicle matching Ward's description, except for a vague statement from a waitress at a small diner, Highway 97 exit, who said she may have seen a man who looked military eating alone on the night of July 8, but could not confirm identity. Traffic data provided by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation showed no reported accidents, collisions, or abandoned vehicles along the route during that time frame. The search team also checked areas along the Washita River, where the low terrain was often used as a shortcut by locals, but found no signs of tire skids or objects that had fallen in. Police deployed a separate helicopter unit to survey an expanded 50-mile radius, focusing on open land and fields, yet the results remained negative. Sweeps of parking lots, motels, and rest stops along Route 183 also yielded no new information. Ward's vehicle, a silver Ford LTD, did not appear in any registration checks or traffic citations issued since the day he was believed to have left home. Additionally, police contacted repair shops, towing services, and impound lots in the 3 surrounding counties to look for matching registration records, but none were found. With no reliable physical evidence, Flynn ordered the creation of a composite map of possible travel routes based on the assumption that Ward left home between 10 p.m. and midnight and would have needed approximately 2.5 hours to reach the airport by car. Using this map, the team circled 8 secondary road segments where he might have stopped, but after 2 days of searches, no suspicious traces were discovered. The search summary report concluded, no objects, witnesses, or mechanical evidence related to Daniel Ward or his vehicle were found. All checked locations were marked with coordinates for archiving and to avoid duplication in case the search area needed to be expanded later. Flynn's final note in the record stated, all search results to date provide no direct or indirect evidence of the subject's journey. Both vehicle and person remain unlocated. No additional witnesses. By July 21, 1983, after 3 consecutive days of deploying personnel with no new data, the search was officially suspended. The case file was moved to administrative monitoring status, kept open in case reports came in from other agencies or new information was provided by the public, but at that point, all field search efforts around Weatherford and routes leading to the airport were closed without yielding anything useful in determining Daniel Ward's whereabouts. 3 days after the field search was temporarily concluded without results, Chief Douglas Flynn received a call from Evelyn Marquez, Daniel Ward's wife, informing him that she had just received a telegram from the Philippines purportedly sent by her husband. According to Evelyn, the telegram confirmed that Ward had arrived safely and would contact her again once he had settled his affairs. She brought the document directly to Weatherford Police Headquarters on the morning of July 24, 1983, to add it to the file. The telegram consisted of 2 short lines printed on the yellow paper typically used by Western Union, reading, "Arrived safely Subic Bay, will call soon. D." With a handwritten signature believed to be Ward's. Upon receiving it, Flynn immediately noticed several irregularities. The validation stamp in the upper right corner lacked the standard telegraph code markings, the transaction number was missing, and the line spacing was inconsistent. Most notably, the thick faded paper did not match the type commonly used for Western Union telegrams at that time. When asked who delivered it, Evelyn stated she received it through the mail with no envelope. It had simply been placed in the mailbox in front of her house. Flynn noted in the record that there were no valid shipping marks or proof of delivery. Based on his experience with administrative documents, the chief suspected it might be a copy or manual reproduction. He decided to send the document to the Forensic Technical Unit in Oklahoma City for authenticity examination. The item was sealed and transported the same day, accompanied by a report explaining its origin and the purpose of the examination. While awaiting results, Flynn conducted a preliminary handwriting comparison between the signature on the telegram and Ward's known signatures in his retirement file, noting clear differences in slant and letter formation. He made a temporary case log entry stating high probability the signature is forged. On July 29th, the examination results came back confirming the document was not an original Western Union telegram. The ink did not match the type used in the company's telegraph machines. Paper structure analysis showed it had been cut from ordinary office paper, with no embossed watermark characteristic of genuine telegram forms. The most telling detail was that the bold printed text originated from a mechanical typewriter, not an electronic telegraph printer. The report concluded, document manually fabricated, showing signs of copying and forgery. Flynn immediately added this information to the investigation file, classifying it as potential fabricated evidence and ordering the document sealed and stored in the police department's evidence locker. He also issued an internal notice requiring all future submissions from involved parties to be verified before being added to the file. The discovery of this suspicious document significantly altered the initial assessment of the case. The hypothesis that the victim had voluntarily left the state became far less convincing, as there was still no verified evidence that Daniel Ward had ever left Oklahoma. However, per procedure, Flynn could not close the file or change its classification until broader federal investigation results were received. In the report accompanying the forensic findings, he noted in detail that the document does not meet technical standards for a legitimate telegram and is highly likely created to support the narrative of travel abroad. The item was labeled Evidence #28 and stored in the Weatherford Police Department evidence vault, designated for long-term monitoring. At that point, it was the first piece of evidence in the entire case suggesting the possible existence of deliberate misinformation regarding Daniel Ward's disappearance. Once the forensic examination confirmed the telegram submitted by Evelyn Marquez was forged, Chief Douglas Flynn recognized that the case had exceeded the normal jurisdiction of a local police department. He immediately prepared a comprehensive report to send to the United States Department of the Navy, the agency that had previously managed Daniel Ward's service and retirement records, to verify whether any official orders or travel schedule could explain the alleged trip to the Philippines. The request was sent on August 1, 1983, and included full identifying information, service number, discharge date, and copies of personal documents seized during the home search. The Navy responded after 10 working days, confirming that Daniel Ward had retired in 1981 and had no authorized duties or overseas assignments in 1983. Personnel records showed he was not on any temporary active duty roster, and no travel funding requests or movement reports had been approved. Based on this data, the Navy concluded there was no official military activity or recorded travel within the scope of military responsibility. Flynn followed up with a second official request through the State Department's diplomatic communication system to the U.S. Consulate in Manila. The purpose was to determine whether any U.S. citizen named Daniel Ward had registered residence, declared temporary stay, or requested consular assistance between July and August 1983. After 3 weeks, the official response from Manila arrived, confirming that no citizen named Daniel Ward or matching the passport number appeared in the consulate's entire database. Additionally, no matching entry records were found at the Philippine Bureau of Immigration. The supplementary report further stated that there were no accidents, emergencies, or deaths involving a U.S. citizen of that name in the Subic Bay area, the location mentioned in the fake telegram. This information reinforced the presumption that the victim had never left United States territory. Chief Flynn compiled all the responses into a 12-page report submitted to the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, clearly stating three main conclusions: no lawful international travel activity, no consular confirmation of the victim's presence, and the telegram document confirmed as forged. He also added a professional assessment that the case shows signs of administrative interference intended to create a false impression of the missing person's travel. In accordance with procedures at the time, Flynn proposed reclassifying the case from routine missing person to missing person suspected of involving fabrication. The proposal was approved internally, moving the file from civil management to potential criminal tracking, thereby allowing broader federal agency coordination when necessary. The updated report was filed under Case MP 83-147, with appendices including the Navy's response letter, the U.S. consulate confirmation, and the forged document forensic results. From that point, the investigation was officially considered to have entered an interagency verification phase, with the focus no longer on a voluntary departure, but on evaluating the possibility of deliberate creation of false information related to Daniel Ward's disappearance. After receiving official responses from the Department of the Navy and the U.S. Consulate in Manila, confirming no record of Daniel Ward existed, the victim's family, under the guidance of Chief Douglas Flynn, decided to independently seek investigative assistance in the Philippines through a private civilian channel. In late August 1983, they contacted a private detective agency based in Manila, run by former local police officer Carlos Vega, who had experience working with American citizens on missing relative cases. A service contract was established with the objective of verifying whether Ward had actually arrived in the Philippines, and if so, determining his last known location or contact. Vega began by reviewing international passenger manifests at Ninoy Aquino Airport for arrivals between July 9 and 15, cross-referencing Philippine Bureau of Immigration entry records. After completing the check, he confirmed no passenger named Daniel Ward or matching the U.S.-provided passport number was listed. He expanded the search to common name variations such as Ward, Ward, or Warden, still with negative results. Next, Vega surveyed several major hotels in downtown Manila and towns near Subic Bay, the alleged destination. Most facilities kept guest records in handwritten ledgers with no electronic system, but no staff recalled checking in an American guest matching the description during that period. Checks at civilian hospitals and military clinics near the former naval base also yielded nothing. No patients or deceased individuals were registered under the name Ward, and no consular assistance requests from a U.S. citizen matched the time frame. By mid-September, Vega extended the investigation to Cavite City, a coastal community about 20 miles from Manila, where Evelyn Marquez's family had previously lived before she moved to the United States. There, several local residents reported remembering seeing a foreign man described as tall, light-haired, speaking English in the neighborhood during the first few days of July. Witnesses said the man was brought by a group of locals to a house near the Central Market, but no one could confirm identity or purpose. When Vega visited the described location, the house belonged to a distant relative of Evelyn, yet the current occupants stated they had not hosted any American during the mentioned period. Although the statements were inconsistent, Vega recorded all information, including a map of the area and photographs of the house from 4 angles plus the rear alley. He also photographed a small backyard garden where the soil appeared recently leveled, though at the time he could not determine whether the area was related to the disappearance. In the report sent to the Ward family, Vega concluded that there is no evidence Daniel Ward entered the Philippines or stayed at any checked location, while noting an unverified report of a foreign man appearing near the residence of the wife's relatives. The complete file, consisting of a 15-page written report, list of verified locations, summarized witness statements, and 12 on-site photographs, was mailed internationally and reached the Ward family in early October 1983. The package was subsequently handed over to Chief Douglas Flynn for inclusion in Missing Person Case MP 83-147. In the supplementary report conclusion, Flynn noted that the private Philippine investigation did not establish the victim's presence in the country and found no evidence of travel consistent with prior claims. However, he requested that the photographs and witness statements be retained as reference material for possible future cross-checking. With the data obtained, all efforts to verify Daniel Ward's international travel up to that point had produced no results, while simultaneously raising new questions about the authenticity of the initial statements regarding the victim's alleged trip abroad. In October 1983, while the Weatherford Police Department was still awaiting responses from federal agencies regarding Daniel Ward's records, a new piece of information emerged that shifted the case toward a far more suspicious direction. The Military Insurance Agency in Washington, D.C., sent notice confirming that it had just received a death claim packet for Ward, mailed in by his wife Evelyn Marquez, in order to request disbursement of survivor benefits under the policy for a veteran with more than 20 years of service. The packet included a death claim form, a notarized copy of a death certificate issued in Oklahoma, proof of marriage, and a beneficiary designation form, all naming Evelyn as the lawful beneficiary. As part of standard procedure, the insurance agency began cross-checking the administrative documents before approval and immediately noticed several suspicious discrepancies. The death claim form used a template that did not match the format issued by the state of Oklahoma. It lacked the official overlapping seal from the health department, and the cause of death section had been filled in by hand with a different type of ink from the rest of the document. The certifying signature was listed as Douglas Flynn, Sheriff, Weatherford PD. But the signature style did not match Flynn's stored signature samples from previous records, and the embossed seal stamped below it had errors in placement and font. The insurance agency sent an official letter to the Weatherford Police Department for verification, and upon receiving it, Flynn immediately denied having signed or certified any death record related to Daniel Ward. Recognizing signs of administrative fraud, he requested that the insurance agency forward the entire original set of documents for forensic examination. When the packet arrived, technicians determined that the death certificate had been printed on ordinary paper with no security features or raised seals as required on official certificates issued by the state health authority. The ink adhesion was uneven, suggesting the document had been produced on a consumer-grade typewriter rather than an official printer. Flynn's signature had been manually reproduced with visible signs of enlargement from another document. The subsequent forensic report clearly concluded that the entire packet submitted by Evelyn was invalid and had been created through the falsification of official administrative documents. The insurance agency immediately suspended all processing of the survivor benefit claim and formally notified the Department of Defense of the incident. When questioned, Flynn stated he had never been contacted or asked to certify a death, and at the time the claim was filed, the missing person investigation into Ward remained open. This forged evidence was instantly regarded as a critical development, not only proving criminal conduct, but also raising questions about a possible financial motive directly tied to the victim's disappearance. Under the policy, survivor benefits for a retired Navy officer could exceed $240,000, including life insurance and transitional retirement allowances. Submitting a claim so soon without an official declaration of death was considered highly irregular. In the report dispatched on October 22, 1983, Flynn noted, "Based on the examination results, it has been determined that Daniel Ward's death records were forged. The person who submitted the claim may have a financial motive, including benefiting from the military insurance policy." All seized documents were sealed in evidence bag number 33 and added to case file MP 83-147 under the classification forgery of documents related to survivor benefits insurance. The sheriff simultaneously notified federal financial authorities to freeze any payout transactions related to Ward's policy until the investigation reached a clear conclusion. In the closing notes of the verification section, Flynn emphasized that the discovery of the forged packet had fundamentally changed the nature of the case from an ordinary missing person report to an incident involving potential financial fraud. However, he also pointed out that although a financial motive had been established, there was still no direct evidence of what had actually happened to Daniel Ward after the night he left his home. By the end of 1984, after more than 16 months of investigation with no further clues as to Daniel Ward's whereabouts, the Weatherford Police Department was forced to re-evaluate the entire case. Reports from federal and international channels all confirmed no travel records, no witnesses who had seen the victim after he left his house, and no physical evidence indicating a crime had occurred. Although the insurance document forgery had been proven, investigators were unable to directly link that act to Ward's disappearance because no body or specific traces indicating death had been found. Under Oklahoma administrative regulations at the time, an adult missing for more than 12 months, with no contact and no appearances in any civil or financial records, could be declared presumed dead for legal purposes. On December 14, 1984, case file MP 83-147 was reviewed in an internal meeting attended by Sheriff Douglas Flynn, a representative from the District Attorney's Office, and the Military Insurance Agency. The minutes of the meeting concluded that, due to the absence of evidence to continue the investigation and no remaining legal basis to maintain the suspicious missing person status, the file would be temporarily suspended and moved to archive status. This decision meant the insurance agency was permitted to resume processing survivor benefit payments to the lawful beneficiary. In February 1985, the Department of Defense Finance and Accounting Service approved disbursement of a $243,000 life insurance benefit to Evelyn Marquez, based on the administrative finding of missing presumed dead. The official record was updated that same year in the Oklahoma State Police database, marking the case status as closed and no crime determined. With the administrative conclusion issued and no further legal grounds to continue the investigation, the Daniel Ward case was removed from the active caseload. After the Daniel Ward missing person file was officially suspended and transferred to archive status in early 1985, all documents, physical evidence, and related records were sealed according to Weatherford Police Department standard procedure and transferred to the Central State Archive of Oklahoma. In 1986, due to changes in the state's records management system, all cases involving military personnel or citizens who had served in the armed forces were transferred to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City, home to the Joint Department of Defense and State Law Enforcement Data Storage Center. Daniel Ward's case file, identifier MP 83-147, fell into the category of missing persons administratively resolved and was stored alongside thousands of others in the physical document warehouse, each file contained in a bar-coded sealed box. From 1986 through the late 1990s, there were no requests from local or federal agencies to reopen or extract the file. Periodic archive reports noted that Box MP 83-147 showed no access, loan, or data addition activity for nearly 15 years. Original physical evidence, including the passport, typewriter, and forged documents, was inventoried annually under evidence warehouse protocols and remained sealed undamaged and accounted for. In the early 2000s, when the Department of Defense launched a modernization and digitization project for military-related records, cases involving veterans were selected for conversion to electronic format to facilitate retrieval. By 2006, the Daniel Ward file had been fully scanned into PDF format, more than 400 pages of documents, investigative reports, crime scene photos, and evidence logs, and integrated into the Joint Electronic Database managed by Tinker AFB. The physical evidence remained in the main warehouse, but was linked by digital retrieval codes. Completion of digitization ensured the file's stable existence in the system, yet it did not alter the case's legal status, as no party had requested reactivation of the investigation. Between 2006 and 2014, the system logged 2 administrative accesses for routine inventory verification only. No agency or individual requested excerpts or information. Internal notes classified MP83-147 as inactive cold file, retained for reference only, meaning it was kept solely for administrative purposes and was no longer under active investigation. At that time, biometric identification technology and the federal DNA database were not yet applied to old missing person cases, making additional comparison or review practically impossible. Tinker AFB reporting shows that over the more than 3 decades since the incident, there were no new data points, no international verification requests, and no further witness contacts regarding Daniel Ward. The victim's family, having received the insurance benefits and completed administrative procedures, also never submitted a request to reopen the investigation. As of 2014, File MP83-147 remained unchanged, stored on Shelf Row 4, Evidence Warehouse 2 at the base, marking more than 30 years since its creation, with no alteration in status. The summary report for that year simply noted, "No new activity, long-term storage." This officially confirmed that the Daniel Ward disappearance had fully entered cold case status, becoming one of thousands of cases retained in the Oklahoma criminal record system, no longer mentioned outside the scope of administrative archiving. By 2015, when the federal case management system underwent a comprehensive upgrade, the Federal Bureau of Investigation began implementing a program to review unresolved missing persons cases, particularly those files involving suspected document forgery or matters tied to federal financial benefits. The program, named the Cold Case Reassessment Initiative, was a joint effort between the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, and the National Archives, with the goal of examining cases pending from before 1990 to determine possible criminal violations that had not yet been prosecuted. During the initial classification phase, the data review team at the FBI's Oklahoma City headquarters discovered File MP83-147, the missing person case of former Navy officer Daniel Ward, flagged in the system as administrative document forgery and unverified financial elements. Because the case involved military insurance benefits and contained a 1983 notation about a telegram determined to be fake, it was placed in the Priority Evaluation Group. In early March 2015, the FBI decided to move the file to regional-level review and assigned Special Agent Rachel Doyle from the Cold Case Unit to conduct the preliminary assessment. Doyle, who had 10 years of experience investigating financial fraud and federal crimes related to military insurance, was tasked with examining all archived evidence in MP83-147 to determine whether the case contained sufficient grounds to reopen a federal investigation. At the time she took over, the file had been fully digitized in the storage system at Tinker Air Force Base and included scanned investigation reports, forensic reports, and administrative notes spanning 1983 to 1985. Doyle spent nearly 3 weeks reviewing every document, paying particular attention to the chain of events surrounding 2 key pieces of evidence: a forged telegram purportedly sent from the Philippines and a death benefits insurance claim package containing a falsified death certificate. She noted that both documents had been created shortly after Ward's disappearance, showed technically similar signs of forgery, and had been submitted by the same individual, Evelyn Marquez, with the apparent intent of supporting claims that Ward had either left the country or died. Under current statutes, those factors could constitute federal document forgery and military insurance fraud if intent to profit were proven. In an internal report submitted to her superiors at the end of March, Doyle recommended re-authenticating the documents using modern forensic methods, since current ink dating and imaging technology could determine age and origin far more accurately than the 1983 examinations. At the same time, she requested retrieval of the original physical evidence rather than relying solely on scans to preserve chain of custody integrity in case the investigation were reopened. On April 6, 2015, the evidence retrieval order was approved. allowing the FBI technical team to access the physical storage vault at Tinker Air Force Base for hands-on inspection. When the storage boxes were unsealed, all evidence was confirmed to be intact, with no signs of damage or substitution. Doyle prepared new inventory logs, documenting the condition of the items, and ordered high-resolution digital photographs of every page for comparison purposes. During examination, she identified multiple consistencies, indicating that the forged documents had likely been produced on the same mechanical typewriter, a detail mentioned in the 1983 report, but never verified through comparative analysis. She concluded that confirming this detail could provide evidence of deliberate fabrication. In her submission to the regional office, Doyle wrote, "File MP 83-147 exhibits clear indicators of document forgery within federal jurisdiction and probable military insurance fraud. Recommend proceeding to expanded review phase to determine motive and scope of violation." The immediate objectives of that phase were defined as verifying the authenticity of all original documents, identifying the means and timing of creation of the suspected forgeries, and assessing whether federal criminal statutes were violated during the submission of Daniel Ward's death benefits claim. Doyle's recommendation was approved at the end of the second quarter of 2015, officially returning this missing person case, forgotten for more than 30 years, to active consideration under the FBI's Cold Case Review Program. After approval for the expanded review phase was granted, Special Agent Rachel Doyle coordinated with the FBI Oklahoma City Forensic Laboratory to retrieve all original physical evidence in MP 83-147 for re-examination using modern technology. On May 17, 2015, the storage containers were unsealed under supervision of Tinker Base representatives. They contained the forged telegram purportedly sent from the Philippines, the death benefits insurance package with the falsified death certificate, and a series of crime scene photographs taken at Daniel Ward's residence and backyard during the 1983 search. All documents were rescanned at high resolution and photographed in detail, then forwarded to the FBI's Specialized Document Examination Laboratory at Quantico for origin analysis. Comparison testing was performed using modern spectroscopy to identify ink composition and paper aging, allowing far more precise dating of creation than the examinations conducted 30 years earlier. Preliminary reports confirmed that the suspect telegram had been typed on an Olympia mechanical typewriter, the same model seized from Ward's home, and that the ink matched to 98% the ribbon residue recovered from that machine. This strongly indicated the document had been created inside the victim's residence rather than transmitted from abroad. Regarding the insurance package, microscopic analysis revealed 3 different inks used within the same forms, indicating the information had been filled in at separate times rather than continuously as required in legitimate administrative processes. The certifying signatures were uneven and showed signs of mechanical reproduction from another original. In addition to document examination, Doyle paid special attention to the old crime scene photographs. While reviewing images taken in July 1983, she noticed a small detail in the background of a backyard photo, a shiny metallic object lying close to the eastern fence, near the corner where the family had once kept potted plants. The original report made no mention of it, likely because the prints were blurry and the angle unclear. However, when digitally enlarged using modern image analysis software, the object clearly appeared round and resembled the face of a metal wristwatch or similar personal item. Since Ward had been a Navy officer and military records showed he received an engraved retirement watch upon discharge, Doyle considered this a potentially significant lead. She logged the observation as photo detail 12C reflective metallic object, possible victim personal item. At the same time, Doyle re-examined the 1983 private investigator report filed by Carlos Vega in the Philippines, which briefly mentioned the backyard of Evelyn Marquez's relative's home in Cavite and included a photograph showing signs of recently disturbed soil. When she compared the 2 data points, the metallic object in the old U.S. photo and the disturbed soil in Cavite, Doyle noted a striking coincidence. Both locations were associated with the victim's wife's family. In a June 2, 2015, memorandum to her superiors, she recommended on-site verification in the Philippines to determine whether the area referenced in Vega's report might contain physical evidence or biological traces related to Daniel Ward. The report emphasized that even after more than 30 years, modern DNA techniques could identify remains and support a theory about the victim's final location if any physical evidence still existed. Doyle's proposal was forwarded to the FBI's International Operations Division for coordination with Philippine law enforcement authorities. While awaiting response, she finalized the technical forensic file, compiling all ink, paper, imaging, and comparative evidence results. The review phase conclusively determined that both key documents, the telegram and the insurance package, had been created inside the victim's U.S. residence with no international origin as previously claimed, and it uncovered an image detail that could open a new investigative avenue. On that basis, File MP83-147 was officially advanced to the stage of reopening extraterritorial field investigation with the objective of locating the last known site associated with Daniel Ward. After Special Agent Rachel Doyle's proposal was approved, the FBI's International Operations Division sent a formal request to the Philippine National Bureau of Investigation, NBI, for assistance in verifying and excavating the parcel of land in Cavite City referenced in private investigator Carlos Vega's 1983 report. The NBI accepted the request and conducted a preliminary survey of the described backyard area of a house owned by Daniel Ward's wife's family. Land records confirmed the property was a small residential lot of over 300 square meters near the bay, which had changed ownership several times in the past 3 decades but retained its original layout. In early August 2015, a joint FBI-NBI task force was formed, consisting of forensic anthropologists, crime scene technicians, and representatives from the Philippine Department of Justice to ensure full legal compliance with international investigation protocols. On August 14, the team officially began excavation at the suspect location, identified from Vega's old photographs and sketches. The target area was in the southeast corner of the garden, where the grass showed different compaction from the surrounding lawn. After removing the topsoil, technicians noted darker soil mixed with lime fragments, characteristic signs of prior digging and refilling. Excavation proceeded manually to avoid damaging potential evidence. At a depth of approximately 1.5 meters, the team recovered the first bone fragments, sections of lower leg and skull, along with small metal objects in the soil. As the area was expanded, a nearly complete skeleton emerged, lying on its right side, wrapped only in rotted cloth with no coffin. Immediately adjacent to the remains, technicians recovered a series of personal effects, a heavily corroded metal wristwatch, still showing a visible face, a silver ring engraved USN, a military belt buckle, and 2 metal Navy insignia fragments. All items were photographed, measured, and documented on site before removal. Bone samples were taken from the femur and teeth for DNA analysis, and surrounding soil was collected for chemical testing. Initial observations indicated the remains belonged to an adult male, approximately 5'10" inches tall, aged 40-45 at death, consistent with Daniel Ward's description at the time of his disappearance. The recovered watch still bore the faint engraving D. Ward, USN Ret, 1981, matching the retirement watch Ward was known to have received upon discharge. Philippine forensic examiners confirmed no coffin or burial items were present, indicating this was not a lawful burial, but a clandestine disposal. During evidence collection, 3 small metal projectiles, consistent with handgun rounds, were recovered from the soil near the rib area. All items were cataloged under Field Log Code, Cavite 2015-01, and placed in sealed evidence bags, jointly labeled by both agencies. After 3 days, excavation concluded in the presence of local government officials and the U.S. Embassy legal attaché. On August 18, the physical evidence and biological samples were formally transferred to FBI custody for transport to the United States for DNA and ballistic analysis. The handover protocol stated that collection had been conducted lawfully under Philippine judicial oversight and U.S. diplomatic supervision, ensuring admissibility in U.S. courts if required. All scene photographs, excavation video, and site maps were attached to the comprehensive report forwarded to FBI Oklahoma City for inclusion in file MP-80-3147. In the interim report, sent immediately afterward, Special Agent Rachel Doyle noted that the discovery of remains together with U.S. military personal effects provides reasonable grounds to establish a direct connection between the Cavite excavation site and Daniel Ward's 1983 disappearance. The biological samples and evidence were flown to the United States in a secure temperature-controlled container with full chain of custody documentation and arrived at the FBI laboratory in Quantico on August 28, 2015, marking the start of formal identification of the recovered individual. The Biological Identification Unit received the remains under case number Cavite 2015-01 and initiated the DNA analysis process in accordance with current standards. Technical specialists extracted genetic material from the femur and molar teeth, while simultaneously conducting bone age testing, sex determination, and morphological analysis for comparison with Daniel Ward's military medical records. Preliminary identification results confirmed that the remains belong to a male with a biological age estimated between 40 and 45 years old, approximately 178 centimeters tall, consistent with the data in the U.S. Navy personnel file. Dental and jaw characteristics matched the dental records archived while Ward was on active duty, including a distinctive filling on the upper right molar. In addition, one of the wrist bones showed calcification consistent with an old injury documented in the 1979 medical record when he sprained his hand during training. These indicators strengthened the likelihood of identification, but the identification process still required absolute genetic confirmation through DNA comparison. A reference sample was obtained from Ward's biological nephew, residing in Oklahoma City, who was determined to be the closest living relative. The laboratory performed the comparison using the STR analysis standard, which allows matching of characteristic short genetic segments across 23 loci. After more than 2 weeks of processing and comparison, the final results showed a complete match with a kinship probability exceeding 99.99%, confirming that the remains discovered in Cavite belonged to Daniel Ward, a former U.S. Navy officer missing since July 1983. The official report was issued on September 15, 2015, with the conclusion positive identification established. Along with confirming the identity, the forensic team also completed a supplementary report on the cause of death. Based on analysis of the ribs and skull, specialists discovered 2 small round fractures consistent with 9 mm bullet entry wounds, one penetrating the right side of the skull and one in the midline of the sternum, suggesting the victim was shot at close range. The metal bullet fragments recovered at the scene exhibited rifling characteristics consistent with handgun types common in the Philippines during the 1980s, leading to a preliminary determination that the victim died from gunshot wounds and was subsequently buried illegally. When the identification results were returned to the FBI Oklahoma City field office, case file MP-80-3147 was officially reclassified from missing person to homicide investigation with concealment. In a report dated September 20th, Special Agent Rachel Doyle clearly stated, DNA identification has proven that Daniel Ward did not leave United States territory voluntarily, but became the victim of an intentional act of violence. Based on the physical evidence recovered, this is a homicide with concealment of the body that occurred outside U.S. territory. The decision to change the case status was approved the same day, marking the first time in more than 30 years that Ward's disappearance was confirmed as a criminal homicide. The U.S. Department of Justice, through the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oklahoma, was notified to prepare for expanded coordination of the investigation under regulations governing crimes against U.S. citizens murdered abroad. All biological evidence and identification reports were transferred to the new case file designated FBI HC 2015 OKDW, replacing the old designation MP 83147, officially marking the transition of the file to the International Homicide Investigation phase. Immediately after the DNA results confirmed that the remains found in Cavite were those of Daniel Ward, and the case was reclassified as a homicide investigation. Special Agent Rachel Doyle simultaneously expanded the scope of analysis to the financial aspect, focusing on the death benefit insurance payout made to Evelyn Marquez more than 30 years earlier. The FBI Oklahoma City Financial Crimes Unit was tasked with retrieving all transactions related to military insurance disbursements from the 1980s, using archived data from the Department of the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. The recovered data showed that in February 1985, Evelyn's account at First National Bank of Weatherford received a transfer of $243,000 from the U.S. Military Insurance Administration, exactly as approved after Daniel Ward was declared missing, presumed dead. This money was gradually withdrawn over an 8-month period in multiple large transactions that did not correspond to normal living expenses. Archived bank statements revealed 3 cash withdrawals exceeding $20,000 each made within the same week, with no stated purpose. The remainder was transferred to 2 secondary accounts at the same bank system, one in Evelyn's name and one in the name of a relative in the Philippines. When cross-referencing publicly available financial data, the FBI discovered that during the same period, Evelyn purchased a small commercial property in downtown Weatherford for $76,000 and registered a business license for a hair salon called Evelyn's Studio, using capital that matched the amount of insurance money received. The business license was issued in September 1985, less than 7 months after the insurance payout. Additionally, personal tax returns showed that from 1986 to 1988, Evelyn reported an average annual income of approximately $48,000, 3 times the local average, with no evidence of legitimate business profits to support it. When checking Philippine bank records through that country's Department of Justice, the FBI received confirmation that an amount equivalent to $30,000 had been transferred in 1986 to an account belonging to Evelyn's relative, matching one of the cash withdrawals in the United States. This transaction pattern was described in an internal report as undeclared cross-border money transfer, an act considered money laundering under current regulations. Furthermore, Doyle retrieved the original life insurance payout file and discovered that the 1984 disbursement documents were still in Treasury archives. When compared with verified signatures from the forensic examination, the results confirmed that all documents used to request payment had been prepared and signed by Evelyn using the forged signature of Sheriff Douglas Flynn. Consistent with the 1983 findings, but never prosecuted because the case had been closed at the time. The clear tracing of the money and the origin of the forged documents provided sufficient legal grounds to consider charges of financial fraud, federal fraud, and forgery of official documents. The Financial Investigation Unit's comprehensive report, issued on October 3, 2015, concluded that the entire process of receiving and using Daniel Ward's death benefit insurance was based on falsified documents, with evidence indicating intentional misappropriation of federally administered assets. The report also noted that Evelyn's banking transactions, real estate purchase, and business activities in 1985, 1986 all had initial capital that matched the misappropriated insurance proceeds. Special Agent Doyle's concluding remarks stated, "Based on the financial evidence and archived documents, there is sufficient basis to establish federal jurisdiction over insurance fraud and document forgery." A preliminary criminal charge sheet was prepared with 3 primary counts: federal financial fraud, falsification of administrative documents, and misappropriation of public property. All documentation tracing the flow of funds was attached to the official case file FBI HC 2015 OKDW, marking the expansion of the investigation from victim identification to pursuing the chain of financial fraud directly linked to Daniel Ward's disappearance. Once the financial analysis was complete and evidence of fraudulent conduct was established, Special Agent Rachel Doyle shifted focus to collecting witness statements to strengthen the timeline of events before and after Daniel Ward's disappearance. The goal of this phase was to determine whether anyone had witnessed unusual activity at the Ward residence on the night he supposedly left, and to verify Evelyn Marquez's connections to individuals who might have assisted or known about the incident. By reviewing 1983 Weatherford census records and old demographic data, the FBI determined that a cousin of Evelyn named Rafael Jimenez, then 17 years old, had been living in the same house with the Wards after immigrating from the Philippines under family sponsorship and had resided with them for over a year. This residency record had never been mentioned in the original investigation because Rafael left the United States shortly after 1984 and left no forwarding address. After tracing him through immigration databases, Doyle located him currently living in San Diego, California, and working as a marine maintenance technician. A formal interview was conducted in November 2015 at the local FBI office in the presence of his attorney. During the session, Rafael confirmed he had lived at Evelyn and Daniel Ward's home from March 1982 to August 1983, and clearly remembered the last night Ward was at the house. According to his statement, late that night, around midnight, Rafael heard a low argument in the living room between the couple, followed by the sound of the garage door opening. Looking out his second-floor bedroom window, he saw an unidentified man standing next to Ward's silver Ford, while Evelyn stood at the doorway, apparently exchanging words before both walked outside. Rafael described the man as heavy-set, wearing a baseball cap, definitely not Ward, because Ward usually wore light-colored clothing, whereas this man wore dark clothing. The car left a few minutes later and never returned. The next morning, Evelyn told him that Daniel had gone to the airport to fly to the Philippines and instructed him to clean the garage. But while doing so, Rafael noticed a few small black streaks on the garage floor that looked like oil or burned rubber. He didn't think much of it until a few days later, when Evelyn appeared anxious and repeatedly told him not to mention to neighbors that he had seen anyone else that night. This statement was fully recorded, signed, and formalized into an official transcript. Following the interview, the investigative team cross-verified the statement by comparing it with 1983 reports in which neighbors mentioned hearing an engine and seeing car lights around midnight, details that matched Rafael's timeline. Doyle assessed the statement as highly credible because the witness had no personal motive and the details provided aligned with information already in the old file. To verify consistency, the FBI conducted a second interview using visual memory aid techniques with photographs of the property. Rafael accurately identified the exact spot from which he observed the events and confirmed the car exited the garage toward the main road, rather than back into the residential area. A polygraph examination was subsequently administered, yielding stable physiological responses with no indications of deception. The psychological analysis report evaluated the statement as credible and likely reflective of actual events. In addition to the primary witness, the team interviewed two former neighbors of the Ward family, Mr. and Mrs. Perry, who had previously noted in the original file that they saw car lights flash that night. When shown the photos and recordings again, they confirmed that Rafael's description matched their recollections, although they did not see who was driving. When compiled, these statements formed a coherent sequence of events on the night of July 8, 1983. At least 3 individuals at or near the Ward residence observed Ward's car leave the garage driven by someone else, while Ward himself was not seen. By the end of December 2015, all statements were backed up, encrypted, and added to the prosecution file, FBI HC 2015 OKDW, with the annotation. Direct witness, time of disappearance. Special Agent Rachel Doyle's summary report concluded, the statements of Rafael Jimenez and supporting witnesses provide critical evidence proving that Daniel Ward did not leave his residence voluntarily, but was removed from the home that night. This is the first independent testimony confirming the presence of a third party at the scene. These pieces of evidence were forwarded to the U.S. Attorney's Office to prepare the next steps in the prosecution process, while reinforcing the argument that the case contained all elements of an organized criminal offense. When independent investigation results, including DNA analysis, financial analysis, and witness statements, all pointed to the same conclusion that Daniel Ward did not leave his home voluntarily, but was the victim of an intentional act. Special Agent Rachel Doyle compiled all the evidence into a final investigative report to submit to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Oklahoma City. The case file was completed in February 2016, consisting of more than 800 pages of documents and appendices divided into 4 main categories: biological evidence confirming the victim's identity, direct witness statements confirming the presence of a stranger on the night of the disappearance, forged documents related to the military death benefit insurance file, and financial flow analysis proving financial fraud. The report concluded that Evelyn Marquez, Daniel Ward's legal wife, had a clear financial motive, had forged the death records, collected military death benefit payments, and was likely involved in staging and concealing her husband's disappearance. After reviewing the entire file, the U.S. Attorney's Office formally approved the request for criminal prosecution and signed an arrest warrant for Evelyn Marquez on 3 preliminary charges: federal financial fraud, forgery of government documents, and concealment of a U.S. citizen's body abroad. The arrest warrant was issued on March 4, 2016, simultaneously authorizing the FBI to coordinate with the Oklahoma City Police Department to execute the arrest at the suspect's residence, a 2-story house in Cleveland County, where Evelyn had lived since 1990. The operation was planned discreetly to ensure safety and prevent media leaks. At 6:40 a.m. on March 7, an FBI Special Task Force, accompanied by 2 local police officers, approached the house while the suspect was preparing to open her ground-floor hair salon. The arrest warrant was read aloud, and Evelyn Marquez was informed of her right to remain silent and her right to an attorney. She did not resist but appeared confused when hearing the charges related to insurance records from more than 30 years earlier. The house was sealed for additional searches under an accompanying search warrant, focusing on locating old documents or evidence that could be linked to the early stages of the case. In the back office, investigators seized a metal storage box containing numerous old administrative papers, including copies of the insurance contract, photocopies of the death certificate, and 2 telegrams identical in format to those previously identified as forgeries in the original file. These documents were sealed on site and inventoried for transfer. Meanwhile, Evelyn was transported to the FBI's Oklahoma City office for booking and identity verification. The arrest was officially reported to the U.S. Attorney's Office at noon the same day, along with confirmation that the suspect was in custody safely, with no resistance or incidents. In her report to the Department of Justice, Special Agent Rachel Doyle noted, the entire execution of the arrest warrant for Evelyn Marquez was conducted in full compliance with regulations based on objective evidence including forensic results, financial verification, and direct witness statements. The goals of preserving the chain of custody and the legality of the prosecution process were fully met. That same day, a detention order was approved, allowing the suspect to be held for questioning. Local media were informed only after the arrest was complete to prevent information leaks. Evelyn Marquez's arrest marked a major turning point in the more than 30-year journey since Daniel Ward's disappearance, the first time the full chain of biological, financial, and witness evidence had been consolidated into a complete criminal investigation file, legally sufficient to move to the federal prosecution phase. Following her arrest, Evelyn Marquez was taken to the FBI office in Oklahoma City for formal federal interrogation. The first interview took place on the afternoon of March 7, 2016, attended by Special Agent Rachel Doyle, a representative attorney from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the defense attorney appointed by the suspect. Doyle began by presenting the entire chain of evidence collected, including DNA results confirming the remains found in Cavite belonged to Daniel Ward, financial analysis proving the misappropriation of $243,000 in death benefits, and witness statements confirming strangers appeared at the Ward home the night he vanished. Evelyn remained calm initially, but gradually lost composure as the evidence was detailed. She insisted she had no involvement in her husband's death, claiming Daniel went to the Philippines voluntarily and died in an accident, but when questioned about the telegrams and death certificate, she admitted she had filled them out herself to legitimize receiving the insurance money. In the recorded statement, she said that at the time, "I didn't know if he was alive or dead, but I needed the money to survive and pay debts," and admitted forging the signature of Sheriff Douglas Flynn on the death records. When asked why the file contained two identical telegrams supposedly sent by Ward, she stated, "I just wanted everyone to believe he had really left the country." However, when Doyle presented forensic findings confirming the documents were created on Daniel Ward's own typewriter with ink matching the ribbon recovered from the home, Evelyn offered no satisfactory explanation and remained silent for the rest of the session. The interview lasted more than 6 hours, was fully audio and video recorded, and included multiple breaks to ensure the suspect's well-being. In her post-interview report, Doyle observed that Evelyn Marquez could not deny the document forgery and financial fraud, even though she tried to avoid admitting direct involvement in any violent act. The following day, a second interview focused on financial aspects. Investigators presented bank statements, real estate purchase contracts, and business licenses timed with the insurance payout. Evelyn admitted using the money to buy a house and open a hair salon and transferring a portion to relatives in the Philippines, but denied any connection to criminal planning. Doyle questioned the link between the transactions and the timing of Daniel Ward's disappearance, yet she continued to insist she just thought he wasn't coming back. This response was noted in the report as an indirect admission that Evelyn knew her husband would never return, strengthening suspicions of at least accomplice-level involvement in concealing the body. After 2 days of interrogation, the FBI finalized the investigative report and transferred the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for prosecution. On March 14, 2016, a formal indictment was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma, listing 3 charges: federal financial fraud, forgery of official documents, and concealment of a U.S. citizen's body abroad, pursuant to 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, 18 U.S.C. Section 1001, and 18 U.S.C. Section 1119. The file included all verified evidence, DNA results, authenticated insurance records, interrogation transcripts, and independent witness statements from Rafael Jimenez. At the initial court appearance, the Department of Justice prosecutor stated that defendant Evelyn Marquez forged documents to collect her husband's death benefits and concealed information about his death for more than 3 decades. Defense counsel argued there was no direct evidence proving Evelyn caused Daniel Ward's death and that receiving the insurance money was a procedural violation rather than a serious criminal offense. However, the prosecution emphasized the deliberate nature shown by creating and submitting fraudulent federal documents and noted the years-long pattern demonstrating intent to misappropriate funds. The court accepted the indictment and ordered pretrial detention. The FBI's summary report to the Department of Justice concluded, through document forgery and fraud, Evelyn Marquez directly profited from Daniel Ward's death and contributed to concealing the truth for more than 30 years. From that point, the Daniel Ward case was officially transferred to federal court jurisdiction, with all evidence, statements, and forensic results forming the basis for national-level criminal proceedings. The trial of Evelyn Marquez took place in May 2017 at the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma in Oklahoma City, presided over by federal judge Harold M. Keating. It drew significant public attention because the case had spanned more than 3 decades and had long been considered an unsolved missing person mystery. In the opening statement, the federal prosecutor argued that this was no longer merely an administrative error, but a deliberate series of fraud and forgery committed to misappropriate public funds and conceal a serious crime. The prosecution began with scientific evidence. DNA analysis from the Quantico laboratory conclusively confirmed the remains found in Cavite belonged to Daniel Ward. Photographs of the scene and recovered items, a watch, ring, and military insignia, were displayed, along with the forensic report describing close-range gunshot wounds. Next, the prosecution presented the financial evidence trail showing Evelyn Marquez received $243,000 in 1985. Death benefits through forged documents, then used the money to purchase real estate and start a business. Bank statements, property contracts, and tax records were projected for the jury, proving the money flow matched the payout timing. The following evidence was the testimony of witness Rafael Jimenez, who had lived with the Wards in 1983. In a recorded statement, he described seeing a strange man next to Ward's car the night of the disappearance and being asked by Evelyn the next morning to clean the garage, where there were black stains resembling burnt oil. This testimony corroborated neighbor reports and previously collected audio data. The prosecution also read excerpts from Evelyn Marquez's interrogation, in which she admitted forging the death records and telegrams to make receiving the money legitimate, and acknowledged that Daniel Ward might no longer be alive. All evidence was woven into a logical narrative. The victim disappeared amid marital and financial conflict. The wife quickly created a story of him leaving the country, submitted fake paperwork to collect insurance, and then lived comfortably off the stolen funds. In the defense portion, Evelyn's attorney argued his client had no motive to kill her husband, and there was no direct evidence she caused Daniel Ward's death. The defense maintained that forging the documents was solely for financial survival during hardship, not to cover up a crime. The prosecution countered that submitting 2 separate types of forged documents, telegrams, and a death certificate, within less than 2 months demonstrated systematic planning. The prosecution also cited federal statutes classifying fraud involving U.S. government property or documents, especially causing loss to the military insurance program, as a felony. To bolster the case, the FBI presented testimony from a document examiner confirming both the telegrams and death certificate were produced on the same Olympia typewriter seized from the Ward home, with identical ink and paper compression marks. Additional financial reports showed Evelyn transferred a portion of the insurance money to relatives in the Philippines shortly after receipt, an action characterized as asset dissipation. During cross-examination, when called to the stand, Evelyn Marquez remained calm, admitted forging the records and collecting the insurance money, but once again denied any involvement in her husband's death, stating, "I just wanted everything to be over." The prosecution highlighted this remark in closing arguments, stressing that the defendant actively closed the case by deceiving the system and distorting the truth. After 8 consecutive days of trial, the 12-member jury found sufficient evidence to convict Evelyn Marquez on all 3 charges: federal financial fraud, forgery of official documents, and concealment of a U.S. citizen's body abroad. The verdict was announced on May 25, 2017. Judge Keating delivered the final sentence, pursuant to the relevant provisions of the United States Code. The court finds defendant Evelyn Marquez guilty of fraud, document forgery, and body concealment. The total sentence is 25 years imprisonment in a federal correctional facility. In addition to prison time, the court ordered full restitution of the misappropriated insurance money plus investigation costs. When the sentence was read, Evelyn remained silent, only bowing her head, and offered no comment. The trial concluded with the judge's observation that this was a classic example that justice, though delayed, can still be served through the perseverance of investigators and advances in forensic science. The 25-year federal sentence ended the 34-year cover-up of the Daniel Ward case, affirming that no matter how much time passes, traces of the truth can still be recovered through evidence and the law. After the sentence for Evelyn Marquez was pronounced in May 2017, the Federal Bureau of Investigation officially released the comprehensive final report on the entire Daniel Ward case, marking the end of a 33-year-long investigation. The report, exceeding 200 pages, was compiled by the FBI Oklahoma City Field Office with contributions from forensic, financial, and international coordination units. The introduction acknowledges that the Ward case was one of the longest-running cold cases in Oklahoma state history. Opened in 1983 and resolved only thanks to groundbreaking advances in forensic science and international cooperation procedures between U.S. and Philippine agencies. The report clearly identifies three main reasons the case remained stalled for more than 3 decades. First, technological limitations in the early stages of the investigation. In 1983, DNA identification systems did not exist, and physical evidence was primarily stored using physical methods, making it impossible to establish identity without a body. Second, legal and geographical factors rendered international cooperation practically unfeasible. U.S. investigative agencies had no jurisdiction in the Philippines, while Philippine authorities at the time lacked forensic infrastructure and data archiving capabilities, preventing timely verification of information regarding the property in Cavite. Third, the case was incorrectly classified from the outset as missing presumed dead, causing the file to be closed before any criminal possibility could be considered. The report also points out that without the nationwide cold case review initiative in 2015, the likelihood of the case being reopened would have been virtually zero. In the operational evaluation section, the FBI affirms that the application of modern DNA identification technology was the key factor in breaking the decades-long deadlock. The precise identification of the remains through DNA matching created a turning point in the entire process, shifting the file from a missing person case to a criminal homicide investigation. Additionally, spectroscopic analysis of printing materials and ink on forged documents allowed investigators to determine the origin and creation date of the paperwork, proving intentional forgery. The report also highly praises the role of the international cooperation mechanism between the FBI and the Philippine National Bureau of Investigation, regarded as a model for cross-border investigation frameworks. The excavation in Cavite, conducted jointly by both agencies, adhered to evidence preservation protocols and demonstrated the effectiveness of bilateral mutual legal assistance agreements. Beyond technical factors, the final report also addresses the human element. Special Agent Rachel Doyle is credited with directly discovering the connection between the forged documents and the Cavite property, while maintaining file consistency throughout the 2-year reinvestigation. The FBI's internal evaluation describes the Ward case as a classic example of how a file that appeared to have completely lost investigative value can still yield results when re-examined with new technology and fresh perspective. On that basis, the U.S. Department of Justice used the case as a model to launch a reform program for cold case processing procedures, expanding digital archiving scope and requiring that every missing person file involving financial elements or military personnel be periodically reviewed every 10 years. Another important section of the report evaluates societal impact. The Ward case not only restored honor to a forgotten former officer, but also strengthened public confidence in law enforcement's ability to deliver justice even decades later. The investigation's outcome also led to the restructuring of record storage systems at Tinker Air Force Base, where thousands of similar files are being digitized in preparation for the next review phase. Finally, in the conclusion, the summary report states, the Daniel Ward case proves that scientific progress, international cooperation, and the persistence of investigative agencies can restore the truth even when time seems to have erased all traces. This is not merely a solved case, it is a reminder of the enduring value of evidence and justice. On August 12, 2017, the official file bearing case number 83 OKF0147 was closed, and all original documents, court transcripts, and physical evidence were transferred to permanent storage at the Federal Judicial Data Center. The final system note reads, "Case completed, resolved after 33 years." With that, the Daniel Ward case was closed, leaving a profound mark on the criminal investigation history of Oklahoma and becoming one of the most significant precedents in handling long-term missing person cases in the United States. The Daniel Ward case, viewed in the context of today's American society, offers profound lessons about the value of transparency, integrity, and faith in justice, even when time seems to have erased every trace. The story began with a disappearance in Oklahoma in 1983. A former Navy officer who vanished without a trace, and for many years, everyone believed it was simply a tragic coincidence. But 33 years later, the truth emerged: forged documents, insurance payouts obtained through lies, and a concealed death that forced the justice system to confront itself once more. What is worth reflecting on is that without the persistence of investigators, without DNA identification technology, and transparent international cooperation mechanisms, this story might have remained buried forever. In modern American life, where administrative, financial, and legal decisions all rely on records and trust, this case reminds us that deceit, no matter how carefully concealed, still leaves traces. The American justice system has proven that justice delayed is not justice denied. At the same time, the story encourages every individual to uphold moral values and honesty in all circumstances, because truth always possesses power that transcends time. For an American society currently facing numerous challenges to trust, from misinformation to financial fraud, the Daniel Ward case serves as a reminder that responsibility, transparency, and technology can combine to protect the nation's foundational values. No one, no matter how much time has passed, can forever hide wrongdoing from justice. If you believe that justice, even when delayed, can still be served, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring cases that seemed closed but still hold answers yet to be uncovered. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where every small clue can reveal a big truth.